Good morning, everyone. Am I on? Can you hear me? Good morning. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, so could I please remind members and those wishing to speak to make sure that you turn your microphones on these, and off when you finish speaking. And please switch your mobile phones off. And when Ruth will be back in a second, and she will confirm that we can start recording. Welcome everyone to the meeting, and I'm Marion Chapman-Allen, your chairman of the licensing panel. On my left I have Taylor, and next to her I have David Blackburn. On my right I have Sarah Worsterham-Smythe, the solicitor, and then we have our officers, Paul Bijega, and Josie Hoven. And Josie, next to you? It's Sue. I didn't recognise you, Sue. I do apologise. And at the end we have our substitute for this morning, William Richmond. And if he wishes to stay for the meeting, he is certainly very welcome to do so. I will now ask the applicants and the witness to introduce themselves. Could I start on the right-hand side, please?
Good afternoon, Chair. Is this on?
You need to press it. Press it and the light goes green, hopefully.
No, on that one. This one. Aha, this one's working. Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Piers Warren from TLT Solicitors, and I represent Green King, who are the applicants here today. And it's probably easier if I introduce Nigel if this one isn't working. So Nigel Barton, he is the tenant and operator of the Bull.
Thank you for that. And could I cross the floor, please, and ask you to introduce yourselves to the panel?
Yeah, so I am Terry Louise Wiseman, and I'm a resident of the High Street in Dereham. And I've also brought with me today my father, Carl Wiseman, who is going to be speaking on my behalf, as unfortunately I have developed a chronic throat problem, and I shall actually be leaving to go to the doctor to get that seen to. So he is here in my place.
Thank you for that. We'll be following the procedures which are on page 3 of the agenda pack. We don't have an apologies, Ruth, because we have a full panel here. And declarations of interest. Do members have any interest to declare? The procedures, as already mentioned, these can be found on page 3 of the agenda pack and will be followed accordingly. This is the application to vary the premises licence. Paul Bijega, the licensing officer, will present the report, which can be found on pages 4 to 43 of the agenda pack, as well as the information that can be found on pages 44 to 45. Paul.
Sorry, Chair, can I just... Chair, can I please just confirm that we have now received the external noise management plan, which has been shared with the panel and with Mrs. Wiseman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the purpose of the hearing is to consider the application to vary a premises licence under the Licensing Act 2003 for the Bull 25 High Street, Dereham, NR19 1DZ. Background. Breckland Council licensing team received an application to vary a premises licence for the Bull 25 High Street, Dereham on the 17th of April 2024. The applicant is Green King Retailing Limited. A copy of the current premises licence is attached as Appendix A. The variation application form is attached as Appendix B. The application requests a variation to the existing premises licence PL0253 to include the rear garden within the licensable area for the supply of alcohol. The submitted plan is to be read in addition to the current licensing plan for the premises showing the internal layout. The submitted plan is for the outside area. to remove current Annex 2 conditions and provide an updated schedule of conditions that are appropriate to the business to address the licensing objectives. For details of the new conditions offered, refer to Appendix B. All hours and activities authorised by the premises licence to remain unaltered. Please note that there is an automatic entitlement for live or recorded music from 0800 hours to 2300 hours, Monday to Sunday, under the Deregulation Act 2015, so long as the conditions are met in the Deregulation Act 2015. The application has been advertised in accordance with the regulations. A meeting was held on the 10th of May 2024 between the representatives on behalf of the applicant, licensing and environmental protection to discuss historic concerns regarding noise-related issues outdoors. Suggestions were provided in regard to a noise management plan and possible restriction on the number of events. To date, no update has been submitted by the applicant in regard to these matters. Just note on there that the noise management plan was submitted yesterday as referenced. Responses were received from the following responsible authorities: the Fire Service, Planning and Police. Copies of their responses are attached as Appendix C. A response as an objection to the application was received from a local resident. A copy of the representation is attached as Appendix D. The objection is on the grounds of prevention of public nuisance. A Google map showing the site and surrounding area is attached as Appendix E. Options. Members have the following options in accordance with Section 35 of the Licensing Act 2003. 1. To grant the variation application as applied for, including the outside area, subject to such conditions as are consistent with the operating schedule accompanying the application. 2. Grant the outside area but modify the conditions of the licence, altering or omitting or adding to them. 3. Refuse the outside area requested but modify the conditions of the licence, altering or omitting or adding to them. 4. Refuse to grant the variation application. Members of the licensing panel are asked to make a decision at the end of the hearing after all parties have been given the opportunity to speak. Members must give full reasons for their decision. Reason for the recommendations. The application must be considered in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003 and subsequent regulations. The guidance is issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and Breckland Council's Statement of Licensing Policy to ensure that a lawful decision is made. The expected benefits are legislative compliance. The implications. In preparing this report, the report author has considered the likely implications of the decision, particularly in terms of carbon footprint, environmental issues, constitutional and legal, contracts, corporate priorities, crime disorder, data protection, equality and diversity, human rights, financial, health and well-being, reputation, risk management, safeguarding, staffing, stakeholders, consultation, timescales. Other. Where the report author considers that there may be implications under one or more of these headings, these are identified below. Constitution and legal. The decision of the committee is subject to appeal to the Magistrate Court. The appeal period is 21 days from the date on which the notice of the decision is given to the person concerned. Public nuisance. The prevention of public nuisance is one of the 4 licensing objectives being taken into consideration by the licensing panel. Equality and diversity, human rights, Human Rights Act 1998, Article 6 and Article 8. The recommendation. that the members of the licensing panel determine the application to vary a premises licence for the Bull 25 High Street, Dereham, in accordance with the Licensing Act 2003 and subsequent regulations. The guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and Breckland Council's Statement of Licensing Policy.
Thank you, Paul. Could I just start off by asking you, I don't know if it's you or whether it's directed at Sue Hammond, when was a noise management plan first asked for by the council?
The noise management plan was discussed in a meeting with Paul and Piers when the application for a variation was submitted.
So your previous meetings that you'd had last year, I thought it was suggested that a noise management plan was put in place?
Yes, that was, so we had complaints of noise. I investigated and I felt there was a statutory nuisance. Now, when a statutory nuisance is identified, the council shall serve a notice, or it can defer the service of that notice for 7 days. So I wrote to the Bull and said that we were considering serving a notice, and Mr. Barton said that they would cease all outdoor events. And I said, we would want some kind of substantive proof or a noise management plan to show that they could run the events without causing a statutory nuisance. So, I'm guessing that was October last year that was raised. And in fairness, they have had no outdoor activities since then. So there was no cause for me to serve a notice. But obviously with this review, it's a good time to look at the whole situation.
But there was an opportunity for a noise management plan to be put forward?
There was, yes, they could have done that, yes.
And it didn't
Absolutely.
happen?
No, they didn't.
Okay, thank you. Taylor?
Nothing from me at the moment.
David?
Yeah, how many people, how many people live within 25, 50 metres of the rear garden of the pub? How many people are likely to be affected by the noise levels? Sorry, thank you.
To be honest, I'm not sure. I know we've got potentially 3 or 4 households directly adjacent. There's 2 properties to the north, and there are several flats on the high street. But it's not a densely populated area. But there are flats.
Okay. And during the summer of last year, there's quite a lot of complaints coming in, and the noise levels then were recorded between 41 and 59, and the proposal here is to increase the noise levels, so if anything, there's going to be more complaints coming in.
Now, I'll clarify that. So the noise levels measured outside were very high. They were in the region of 79 decibels. Mm-hmm. The noise levels that were taken inside the resident's property were between 41 and 59. Gotcha. So we're suggesting a noise level outside. So again, we're recommending a maximum noise level. That's based on the premise that inside a property, for restful sleeping and for living, 35 decibels in a living room and 30 decibels at night time. So the starting level of 65 is based on the attenuation of a brick wall being about 35 decibels. Of course, that's in ideal situations where noise is propagating across straight surfaces and you've got a double-skinned wall. we don't really know, because this is a coaching in with a yard, lots of reflective surfaces. We could find that noise reflects. We might find that the residence flat, the attenuation isn't quite so good. So the idea of a noise management plan is that you can have a little fluidity. So where we can start with 65, we could say, well, actually, we're not getting 35 decibels of attenuation through the wall. We'd like to bring it down to 60 or 55, because, you know, obviously we can project, we can calculate, but until we actually
Apologies, everybody, for equipment faults.
There's a spare one here.
I'm sorry, where did I get to before
I could hear you.
Yeah, so whilst we can calculate, until we actually get into the, you know, listen, it's difficult. So that's why we've put a starting point of 65 decibels.
It needs to be in front of you for the camera.
Happy, David?
Okay. You're all right at the moment,
Keep,
Liz?
yeah, stay with David.
Stay with David.
We've
You
got
keep
quite a
going,
list
David.
to work
If
through.
they're relating to Paul and Sue's
Yes,
report.
it is. Like you just mentioned the damping of the brick walls and everything, but we're talking of summer here, and people are going to have their windows open, and they're going to want to be sitting outside and whatever. Do you take that into account, or do you turn around and say to people, well, okay, you're going to have to close your windows and draw your curtains to mitigate the best you can?
Yes, absolutely. The noise levels you would expect outside, again, we would be looking at 50 to 55. There we go. Yes, so outside we would expect a level of 50 to 55 to be acceptable. Yes, absolutely. Night time, people are going to have windows and doors open. So again, this is why we're proposing to have, you know, a maximum level of 65 with a view that we can reduce it if we're feeling that it is excessive. Again, an open window.
There you go.
Yes, so a semi-open window is thought to give 15 decibels of attenuation, but again, because of the location of the window, it's at a right angle. So again, until we start taking measurements, it's difficult to know exactly how the noise will be attenuated, which again is, like I say, is why. Setting that initial level and then bringing it down if necessary. If we find the noise is going around the corner and through the windows, you know, we've got that flexibility to reduce that level further still. One of the other things that's suggested is having events finishing at different times. So obviously the most significant time is later at night when children are trying.
Sue, am I right in understanding that there was more than one complainant?
Last year, so 2023, we had a single household complaint. The previous year, we had 2 households and a complainant who didn't give us their address.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions from Sue, we'll move on. Are we ready for that, Sarah? Yeah? Could I now ask the applicant to make their presentation? And you can call any witnesses and or produce any documents that you feel are relevant to the application.
Thank you, Chair. If necessary, I'll speak up. It's probably good you've got your father here if you've got a bad voice and the microphones aren't going to work. But this application actually has 2 parts to it, and we've got to sort of remember what we're looking at in terms of the actual application itself. So very quickly, we're looking to add the external area to the premises licence for licensable activities, in this case the sale of alcohol. And then we're looking to amend and update the operating schedule. You'll have seen from the licence that there is a very long list of old conditions that came across with the public entertainment licence in 2005, which should all be stripped away, to be perfectly candid, and the conditions updated, you'll see, and we've got the new conditions and operating schedules at pages 26 and 27. There's 13 new conditions there. They're all listed a bit together, so very quickly there's a training condition for staff, incident log, pub watch, public safety inspections, signage about leaving quietly, monitoring the external area, no drinks outside after 11 p.m, which reflects a condition currently on the premises licence, noise checks during regulated entertainment, a complaints log, a management plan for entertainment, closing doors and windows for regulated entertainment or at 9 p.m, supervising children and no children after 9 p.m. So those are a run through of the tenet of the conditions. You'll see them all there in full in pages 26 and 27. Paragraph 1.6 of your papers of the report makes it clear that there are no representations from responsible authorities here. Obviously, you've heard from Sue in her capacity as the Environmental Protection Officer, but no representation was made to this application. There is a letter from the fire officer at page 36, which again is a standard letter they send out about making sure you do your fire risk assessment. And then specifically, planning and police wrote in and said they had no objections. And the police letter at page 39 expressly states that the new conditions support the licensing objectives. So they had no objection at all to this application. We've been working closely with Sue, and I think it was a very good question, Chair, that you had in relation to could we have done the noise management report earlier. Well, it was a working and fluid document, and the reason why it took so long was because we did have some trial events that we hoped would allow us to finesse things. But as you've heard, the May Day bank holiday was a washout, which gave us no opportunity. And indeed, in working with the officers, when it was pointed out in October that we needed to stop doing events until we had this resolved, the events were stopped. And it wouldn't have been a fair thing to do something over the winter anyway. You wouldn't have got a decent set of factors that are sort of, if you like, relevant to how the events would look in the summer. So it was agreed we would wait until the start of this year, which is what we've done. So yes, it does mean that things have been concertinaed a bit, but you do have a working operating document there that we have been working on with Sue. And I'll come to that in a minute. Paragraph 9.12 of the guidance you'll know very well. Each responsible authority is an expert in their own area. So when it comes to things like crime and disorder, the police are the experts. When it comes to noise, Sue is the expert. And as you've heard from her in some detail about why the plan is like it is and the management plan does what it does, I'm going to ask you to, or my submission will be that obviously you give that considerable weight when coming to determine this matter, insofar as the point she raises about there should be and could be means of controlling music by certain ways of doing it, and I'll go into that in a minute, but that this isn't about stopping or preventing all or any external entertainment, which would be, in my submission, disproportionate. What this application is not is an extension of ours, and it's not a review of the current premises licence. The word review got used earlier, I think, in mistake, if I'm perfectly honest, because this is a variation. It's not a review of the licence. And as your solicitor will be able to advise you, there is case law on the point as to the difference between what you can do on a review and a variation. And unless anyone wants to hear a slightly tedious lecture in law, I don't intend to go into it unless there's any specific points that come up. So yes, while we are permitting the sale, or we're asking for the permission for sale of alcohol outside, which is essentially to allow for waiter and waitress service to tables, handheld PDA devices for payments, it does allow for live and recorded music outside, just by the nature of the way that the Live Music Act 2012 works and the recorded music exemption, which came in 2014. So those come in as part of the application itself, even though they're not the application itself. The reality is that the reason why the Live Music Act was brought in was to allow for premises to have music in and outside premises, and that there was a mechanism built into the Licensing Act under Section 177A to remove that exemption and to impose conditions on a review of the licence. So the mechanism is, if you like, it's permissive legislation with a power to review that and remove those activities if it's determined that there is a public nuisance. So there is no reason as a starting point why properly managed music cannot occur outside. And whilst we fully accept there have been previous complaints, and we have worked with Sue to remedy the situations there. Oh, there you go. There goes my microphone. It lasted slightly longer than anyone else's, but shall I just carry on? Are you happy for me to? There we go. Try and run the batteries out on all of them around the table by the end of this. So whilst we fully accept there were previous complaints, you've heard there was one household complaining in 2023, two in 2022. I think those two related to the blues weekend. I'm not sure. I'd look to Sue on that. But in any event, in 2023, we're talking about one household, not any other premises or households around the area. One does have to put that in the context of what we're doing here in licensing. So to deal with this matter, we have proposed two conditions you will see in the papers I've just referred to. One is that we have to do noise checks when there's music. And the second one is there must be an entertainment management plan, and you've seen that as part of the papers here. There is a copy of the plan which shows where the noise checks are to be carried out that accompanies it. So there are three dots to the south, if you like, to the bottom of the plan. Those are nearest to the residential property. So one's on the corner, one's outside her front door, and one's on our side of the fence, if you like, on the party who's made a representation here. And then there's one on the other side as well, just to make sure everything's covered there. We've also agreed, in conjunction with Sue, to limit the number of events outside. Now, because of the way the Live Music Act and recorded music exemptions are constructed, we've not offered these as conditions, because conditions under those bits of legislation don't have effect. So we thought it best to put it in writing to Sue. I would publicly say what these are here today, so it's on the record. So if there were issues, or if we went way beyond what we said we were going to do, we could be held accountable for it. The agreement was for 8 events per year. We're talking outside only here. 8 events per year maximum, 6 of which would be DJ events, which is much easier to control. There's one sound source and 2 bands. The DJ events to end at the latest at 11 p.m. The 2 bands would be on a Sunday of a bank holiday weekend, and they would end by 8 p.m. at the latest. All of those would be one-day events, so they wouldn't be long events over weekends. The only event outside of that that would happen regularly is the Blues Festival, which is a town-wide event. You know it much better than I do. There's lots of places that put entertainment on outside, and that would be dealt with by way of temporary event notices, as has always been the case. And I think the idea there is to put some of the music inside and some outside. Weather dependent, absolutely, as is always the way with the British weather. Now, what we have said is there may be occasions, and there would be very rare occasions of national importance, where there might be an event that could be held outside of these constraints. So we haven't said that would be an absolute fix, but we would want to consult with Sue prior to any of these events. In any event, so she knew when they were coming up. We'd happily consult with the residents as well, so you know when these events are coming up. But with that number of restrictions, we would hope and anticipate that we're striking the balance between ensuring proper protection of public nuisance, which is the licensing objective, but also giving the business the opportunity to operate as well. We will continue to work with Sue, as you've heard. This plan, as you've heard, is a working document, so that means it's subject to change if there are things that work well that don't work well. You'll see in there, for instance, that speakers will be positioned in such ways to minimise likely music disturbance. That's at point 1, halfway down the first page. That's because we were hoping on the May Day event that by repositioning the speakers in a different position, actually it would have a significant effect on the way that the noise propagated around the area. In a rough test, I think it was found, or it was anticipated that would work very well, but obviously with the weather we weren't able to test it fully, so that's going to be the plan next time we're with Sue. Those could be moved again, so there's lots of ways you can control music and how it propagates around the area. You'll see in there that the controls are with the team at the Bull and with Nigel ultimately to ensure that the musicians and DJs are fully aware that they are under his control in terms of levels, and if they don't adhere to them, the ultimate penalty is, well, you're just not going to play. So the controls are with the pub there to ensure that the levels are kept to as required as part of the agreement. And as you've heard about the differences in levels and how it works, the testing levels we've got here, again, would be subject to change if it was found that was necessary in certain circumstances. We would also certainly invite the resident and any other residents. Indeed, Nigel has a good, has been in the town for a very long time, has been at the pub for 5 years, knows a lot of the locals are, well, a lot of the customers are very local people. We'd invite anyone to come and speak directly to Nigel, and he'll happily give his number to any resident who wants it, so that there is a direct link on any particular evening for complaints. And if you feel happy to do that, we can set that up. If you feel you'd rather go through Sue, perfectly acceptable, and we can deal with it that way. It's entirely up to you. We'll work with you on that. We do, however, have to reflect on a couple of points here. One is that we are dealing with the prevention of public nuisance licensing objective. And we have to remember that not all noise is a nuisance, and not all nuisance is a public nuisance. And indeed, individual households sometimes would be considered a private nuisance. Now, that's not to denigrate anything or to say that diminishes it or makes it any less important that people get their rest, etc. But as you're aware from the Licensing Act, that takes it outside of the public nuisance and puts it into other legislative areas, so other statutory bodies. So statutory noise abatement notices would be one, private nuisance prosecutions are another. So we just have to be careful that we understand what we're dealing with here as a licensing committee and a licensing application. Just very quickly, Nigel's been at the Bull since April 2019. We all know what happened during COVID and what happened to the industry and the decimation of hospitality. He has lived in the town for a very, very long time, and it is very much a local pub. He employs 10 staff, 3 of those are full-time, 7 part-time. Music is critical to the business, and it is something that has allowed him to continue the business. And music outside creates a different atmosphere, gives something a bit different that people really do enjoy, especially in the summer months, and it has become a significant part of the business. He has agreed to reduce the number of events down to work with residents and work with Sue from what ideally he would like to do. And we fully appreciate that's the kind of compromises we should be making in these circumstances, and we hope that's recognised here by you today. So I'm going to propose, if I may, that the application can be granted on the terms that it's submitted to you, both in terms of the conditions and to add the external area. You've seen the management plan, you've heard why that's a dynamic document that we wouldn't suggest is added to the conditions on the licence, because you wouldn't want to have to vary the licence every time you varied anything within the plan itself. And on that basis, Chair, I'd invite you to ask any questions you may have of myself or of Nigel as the operator.
Thank you, Mr. Warne.
Chairman, sorry, can I just interrupt? I'm now leaving for my doctor's appointment, so my apologies, and thank you very much for your time today. I hope to be back obviously to hear the rest of this, but if not, thank you very much for your time and for...
It's very important that you get that appointment because we can't get them.
No, exactly. And yeah, thank you obviously for taking obviously...
No, thank you for coming.
Through my dad, so thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Warne, I don't know whether you would like to answer this or whether it be Mr. Barton. Out of curiosity, why is the DPS not here today?
There is, and I don't mean to sound in any glib way, there is a pub that needs to be run, and Mr. Barton ultimately is the tenant, so he has the ultimate say. So Green King are the freeholders of the pub. Mr. Barton very kindly stepped in when it looked like the pub might have closed, took it on a 1-year agreement and then signed a 5-year agreement. So he is ultimately the person responsible. So he is ultimately the one who can speak for what the pub can do.
Well, Mr. Barton, given that the report states that the DPS was very much involved with the concerns from the resident, were you ever spoken to about these complaints?
Only when Sue approached me back in September of last year. Apart from that, I had no knowledge of any other complaints.
So you're telling the panel that the DPS did not inform you, as landlord, that complaints had been raised. You were unaware?
Unaware until that point. We had a written letter in the September, I believe, and then Sue pointed out to me that was the Blues Festival was too loud, and then we had this big event in the September, and that was too loud. And from that moment on, we cooperated as best we could.
Chair, I think it's fair to say we can't simply just say that the DPS was informed and aware. There has been a mention in the letter by the resident that someone at the pub was received a complaint. We can confirm that was never passed on, and we don't think it was passed on to the DPS because we have no reason to believe that the DPS would not have passed that on. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. Well, I would query that, Mr. Warne, because in the report it says, I didn't make a note of the page, I'm sorry, but it's in the comments from the DPS where she says that she was a persistent complainant. However, my feeling is that the DPS and the pub were not licensed to play outdoor music at any time. So the DPS was aware because she quoted, it could be on page 26. Is it page 26, Sarah?
At page 44, there are references from the briefing note from Sue Hammond, speaking to Mrs. Dearpool, in July 2023.
Thank you. Yes, so what I was referring to was the fact that the DPS was aware because allegedly she said that she's a persistent complainant. Do you have any questions, Taylor?
I'm just reading this part again, so no.
Yeah, on your noise management plan, you're talking about minimising likely musical disturbances. Can it not be prevented rather than minimised? Or is that just not possible? And the other thing is you say you're going to provide them does not unreasonably disturb local residents. Well, Yeah, unreasonable is fluid. What do you believe is unreasonably disturbing? Because peace and quiet on a nice Sunday afternoon, sitting in your garden is not. I wouldn't want loud music playing. And sorry to go on. You say that you want to ensure you can have table service and DPS things and whatever. Do you need live music to provide table service, etc.?
Found it.
Oh, I'm still on, sorry.
So let me explain. We are licensing the external area for the sale of alcohol, which we need to do to have handheld PDAs for payments, or certainly that's one interpretation of the legislation. We are not applying for live and recorded music outside. They happen automatically under the Live Music Act 2012 and the Recorded Music Exemption 2014. There's nothing we can do about that whatsoever. So they come automatically as part of that. One could use temporary event notices to do music outside, but because we're licensing the external area, and all this came about because actually there had been, as you will see in the report, there was an error that had been identified where everyone had thought that there had been the outside area license, and it turned out it hadn't been. So we've had to come back to correct that error, if you like, that would have been shown on the license for a number of years. And that's no blame to any officers. These things sometimes happen, and so we've tried to correct that. So if you like, the live music and recorded music follows from us having to relicense the area so that we can do proper table service and PDAs, etc., to sell alcohol. The reality is we do want to do some events outside, and we've never hidden that at all. What is reasonable is what the officer determines is reasonable in the circumstances, because, as I say, not all music outside is unreasonable. For instance, the Blues Festival simply would be non-existent if we said, well, you can't no one can have any music outside. It would be a very, very different beast. So there is a level and a threshold where it is reasonable to have activities that might cause in other circumstances, a public nuisance, but because it's infrequent and it's reasonable times, that would be considered perfectly reasonable. And I'll give you a very good example. Any festival in the country, Glastonbury, which we license, sort of 250,000 people turn up, and you can imagine the disturbance and public nuisance that causes, if you like, over a long period of time. And it's not just the 6 days of the festival; it's for the weeks before and after. So what we're asking for here is the balance that we're trying to set with your expert, who is Sue from Environmental Protection, as to what is reasonable in the circumstances for a town centre pub that isn't in a major conurbation, compared to what would be acceptable, compared to what would be unacceptable. So yeah, we have to use terms like reasonable, because that's effectively the test under the statutory act. Did I answer all of your question there?
Enough. Sorry. Could you refresh my memory on the number of events you want to have over the year? Because over the year over the year will be one thing, but then if you're going to compress that over the year just to summer, that is virtually every summer weekend.
So, shall I read out exactly what
Yes,
we've proposed? We would propose 8 events per year, 6 DJ events ending at 11 p.m, 2 bands, the bands both on bank holiday Sundays to end by 8 p.m, all to be one-day events. Predominantly on a Saturday, but with the exception of the 2 live bands being on the Sunday of the bank holiday bank holiday weekend. The Blues weekend will sit outside of this and fall under a temporary event notice. Yeah. Now, what we have said is effectively, therefore, we would also concertina those. So the bank holiday weekends would have a DJ on a Saturday night and then the band on the Sunday, finishing on the Sunday at 8 p.m. So that is effectively 6 weekends out of 6 months of spring and summer and early autumn. So it's nowhere near every weekend, and there would be fallow weeks in between each one. So the idea is they're spread out over a long period of time. Effectively, it works out at 1 every 3 weeks or so, if you look at it in sort of over the course of a summer. But it allows a bit of flexibility so that we have awful weather like we did on the May Day bank holiday, something can be moved, etc. But the idea is that there is then space in between each event for fallow weekends, so you're not disturbed every weekend.
Mr. Warren, I apologise for not being able to give you the information. It was on page 44 of the report, the last paragraph, the 7th of the 7th, 23. Ms D stated that they have live bands and regular DJ disco events, both indoors and outdoors. These finish at 11 and earlier on a Sunday. She denied that noise is excessive and claimed that she knows who made the complaint and that she's a persistent complainant. And Sue goes on to say, I advise that I'll be monitoring to see if the complaints are justified. So the DPS was aware of it because it's stated in Sue's report. I just thought I would just give you the page that was on.
Sorry, I gave you this page number as well. Yes, I have read that, and we would accept that from the 7th of the 7th there was some interaction with Sue. In terms of the DPS's interaction, as Nigel said, he wasn't aware of it, and it will be raised with the DPS. But this is, first of all, we have to be very careful. This is not a review of the premises licence, and it is a comment from a report where an officer hasn't actually put in a representation. But even if we accept it on face value, we were not aware of, or Nigel was not aware of, any issues until this summer in 2023 when he was dealing with Sue.
So you say that there will be an outside drinks bar with table service?
No outside bar. It will be PDA, so handheld devices for payment purposes.
And the drinks will be brought from the pub?
Yeah, so waiter
garden.
and waitress service, if you were to come and have lunch there was a good lunch trade there today when we were there.
So are they not licensed at the current time to drink in the garden?
The garden's permitted for consumption only. And there is a legal argument about whether you need to license the area for you to be able to use handheld devices to take payment. So that's why we're doing that.
I understand. Taylor?
Yes. Yeah, my question also related back to the statement on page 44, and just a bit of clarity really, either from yourselves or from the officers that have been working on the report. For 2022, it says there was 3 households that complained, and there's 3 logs in the complaint log, and then 1 in 23 rather. So is it correct for me to assume that one household has only made 1 complaint, or has that one household made numerous of complaints because there's only 1 date logged, like in the date received?
When we talk about complaint, it's when somebody complains to the council and that they receive that complaint, but that complaint can be comprised of many complaints, but we talk about each complaint as a person complaining to the council.
Okay, so where it says the complaint, the one, say, dated the 7th of the 5th, 2023, that person might have made multiple calls or representations to the council, but it's only been logged as 1 complaint, although it could be a series of complaints.
Absolutely, yes.
On that day.
No, that is the day that we will see the first complaint and the open our case. So I think that cases would be a better term. But yeah, when somebody makes a formal complaint, we open the case and that is the day.
Sorry, it may be in here, I might have missed it, but do we have a breakdown of that? Because I don't feel like that in itself is very representative of the scale of nuisance that is causing to the complainant. On the flip side of that, obviously that's how we measure our complaints. Where the DPS has claimed that that person is a persistent complainant, is there a record that's kept by the pub or to reflect, you know, when complaints have been made previously, or is that something that's going to be brought in new?
So that's one of the things we've agreed to put in so there can be no confusion at all. So one of the conditions is for a complaints log now to be maintained. So if any of the residents want to complain directly to the pub, there will be a log. Sue can come along and check what the complaint says, what was done to check it, and then if there was any remedial action taken. So this should clear up any of these. We don't have one at present. Well,
No, we don't.
No, we don't have one at present. Well, we stopped all the music when we heard about this, so yeah, we've not had one at present.
We're on go. When you have had these events in the past, and you will obviously be expecting, if the licence is granted, to get the same capacity, how many people generally attend?
Approximately 50 to 70 maximum, because we can hold about 65 seated.
Is that inside or outside?
Outside.
Outside, okay. And what guarantee can you give the panel that the times for the music will finish at the times that your solicitor has proposed? Because I know we can't go back, but looking back, there were events that went on beyond the times that you were allowed. So what guarantee can you give the panel that these times will be adhered to and the music will be shut down and it will be quiet apart from the general buzz of conversation?
We do that at present. All music inside, if we close off at 11, we definitely close off at 11, and we always have done that.
Can I just answer that as a legal point, if I may, Chair? Effectively, because this is done under the Live Music Act and recorded music exemptions, one has to stop the music at 11 legally. So to breach that would be a breach of the premises licence under section 136 and could lead to prosecution, 6 months imprisonment and unlimited fines. So there is, if you like, a very serious set of consequences. The other consequence, of course, is that we would expect soon, no doubt, to come back here with a review of the premises licence immediately. So we are prepared to ensure that these things are cut off, and these are the maximum times, and it's fully understood that this is the maximum time and it won't be gone over. Music inside, I think, is permitted as set out in the premises licence, which is something we're not talking about here today at all, so I won't touch that. But outside, it's very clear what is required and how that needs to be managed. The management policy is very clear. Everyone should be aware of it, even if senior management are away. Whoever is managing has a plan and has to understand what they're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Yes, you've made it very clear that it is the application that we're looking at. I asked the question about the times because the report states that internal music and on occasions external music was going on beyond the licensed times. So I just wanted to ask that question to get.
You have our reassurance. Live music can continue inside Thursday to Saturday till midnight, as on the licence. So there is a difference in times, but we're fully aware of that, and you have the reassurance of Mr. Barton and his team that those will be adhered to.
And we have never had live music after 11 o'clock inside, apart from Christmas, New Year. We close the music off at 11 o'clock Fridays and Saturday nights if we have it on a Friday.
And because you get an extension at Christmas, New Year and bank holidays anyway, so, yeah. David?
When the music is inside, do you still do the same readings at people's properties or around the perimeters to prevent?
If we had a complaint about music indoors, but our complaints would be about outdoor music.
So just by the pub through the summer opening the doors and stuff like that, that is no bother.
We have had mention of being able to hear DJ himself rather than the music, but that again, that's some advice that I can give to Mr. Barton. But primarily the complaints have been regarding the outdoor music.
Okay.
Just to answer that sort of definitively from a licensing point of view, one of the new conditions requires noise checks to be carried out at noise-sensitive properties when regulated entertainment is undertaken. That's irrespective of inside and outside. The layout of the premises inside is that the bands, I don't know if you know the Bull. Yes, so it's that front bar. So as you come in off the high street, the bands are then to the left. Basically, there's a central bar away from that which has the doors out into the nearest areas to the resident. There's a double set of lobby doors, so actually the sound should be very, very easy to control. But then that's the doors to the garden are in the back bar away from it. So the music isn't held there inside; it's in the front bar, as far away from those back doors as you can hold it.
So Sue, how would this?
Marianne? Take that across.
Very determined to get. Thank you, David. How would the noise management on the external side of the pub, Sue? How would that take place by the staff?
They will carry out patrols, and they're proposing to use a phone app for their measurements. Phone apps aren't terribly accurate, but we'll give them a good ballpark figure. Obviously, because this is, if it's granted, it will be a new thing. I will make sure that I have monitoring equipment put inside our complainant's property so we can see what noise levels we're getting, and I'll do some out of hours visits. But once we're confident that it's being achieved, we would leave it for the staff to monitor, and they are required to keep a log. So in the event we get a complaint, I can ask to see the log and check what checks they were making, if they'd put the correct, if the values were correct. Just as we would with anything else, we have to go on trust.
Within the external noise management plan, is there scope where it refers to points, the methodology for checking levels, points 2 and points 4, on making the recordings showing the time, date, position, level recorded, action taken to reduce levels. Is there also scope to obviously for the member of staff that's, you know, been responsible for that to be included in that, so there's a level of accountability, so it's not, for instance, when we're having this discussion today and we're saying, did the DPS let you know? No, they didn't, but actually you can then look and say, well, it was recorded, why haven't you done something about it?
Are you proposing effectively that whoever does the checks initials to say they've done the check so we know who's done each check? Yes, I mean, there's
No problem at all.
no reason why the complaints log couldn't be initialled each day by whoever does the checks or each individual check initialled. And that's something we can build in there.
We'll go, there we are. Right, thank you very much for answering our questions. Now could I ask if there are any interested parties, responsible authorities, that have any questions for the applicant? So, Mr. Wiseman, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Yeah, there we go. I guess that my main question to the applicant is overall, and I know you've covered it, is the policing of it. And we can all sit here and give good words of, yes, the staff will do this, the staff will do A, the staff will do B. Unfortunately, historically, and I know the premises has a current licence, which they, as we know, haven't abided by in certain respects, which is why we're in this situation now, in that you are looking to licence your outside bar so you can have legal outside entertainment, because up until now that's not really been a permissible action, because it says only indoor entertainment. I mean, in some respects I thank you for what you're proposing, because it is in an attempt to minimise the disruption that it is causing. I know we're only saying, you know, my family as such, but it is a disruption. But I have had experience myself of the noise that comes from that premises. On a Sunday morning, the outside speakers were on unnecessarily. There was no, the pub wasn't even open. The cleaner was in and had the radio on. Okay, but the outside speakers were on, which we could clearly hear in my daughter's kitchen. So I went downstairs and asked them to turn them off, which, okay, they did, which is what you would expect them to do. And obviously that's then not registered as a complaint because we've dealt directly with the premises. But there is, that's my one question, is really how is it going to be policed? You know, what guarantees are there?
Can I? And it's a fair question, and it's a point that I think it's worth addressing again, just to make sure we're all very clear. There was a significant period of time over many years where the licence itself stated on the face of it music could be permitted outside, and everyone was working off that basis, and that's not to criticise officers or anyone else. That just was the way the licence had been produced. It was only after the complaints had been received by your daughter and it was investigated that this came up. We were informed about it and stopped the music outside. And yeah, there was a period of time where we were saying, well, hang on a minute, why have we been allowed to do this for years? It's on our licence and now we're being told not to. But we've worked with the officers, so we stopped it. So yes, you could say technically we weren't doing what the licence allowed. But to all intents and purposes, everyone thought we were doing what was allowed. So we all thought we were acting within the bounds of the licence. So I completely understand why when you then look at the licence, it looks like we've been doing something illegally, cynically. But there was no cynicism in it. So if I can just be very clear, there was no cynicism in that at all. I'm glad to hear the speakers were turned off when you went down and asked, and it's a bit daft and foolhardy, and it's something that can be raised as a, you know, don't do something silly like that. What's the point? The guarantees are effectively that having gone through this and gone through the process and worked with Sue, we don't want to cause a public nuisance, because in causing a public nuisance, the licence can be reviewed. And we're all back here again, and they do want to have some element of external entertainment, so it is incumbent upon them to stick within the rules and what has been agreed and what has been put forward. And once again, I'd invite you or your daughter to contact Nigel directly at the time of an issue, because as you can see your own experience, something could be done about it then. You know, Nigel's more than happy to work directly with you to make sure that there is that line of communication. So we're not relying on then Sue having to come out a couple of days later and say there was a complaint. Let's go over the logs, let's go over the records, let's see what there was. It's much easier if we can deal with it there and then. And it may not be that everyone agrees all the time as to what's right and what's wrong, but at least there's a conversation going on. So I'd hope that give you some comfort, and we will continue to work with Sue to deal with any complaints.
Obviously, one of the concerns, though, is that once it becomes, if it's approved, it does effectively give you carte blanche to have music outside, uncontrolled, almost. So my question is, what is the proposal? You specified what you intend to do as far as live music, DJs, live bands. Will you still oblige by the current policy, which is that external music is turned off at 9 o'clock?
Yes, happy to continue to turn background music off at 9 o'clock, as we would do. I mean, obviously background music's not licensable, so again, we're talking about things outside of, but you've asked for it publicly, we've stated publicly we'll do that. I mean, I think it's probably worth us just noting it in the external noise management plan that we'll turn the outside speakers off at 9 o'clock, and then that's something that we can be checked against again, if you're happy with that.
Mr. Warren, could I just interject and ask how you would give the information of Mr. Barton's contact?
Entirely up to her how she would like it. A direct phone number we talked about.
My direct phone number.
Or if she wants a phone number for someone at the pub, or indeed an email address, or all three, whatever suits her best. So. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's a question that's relevant to the application, but I would like to put it on record that as you are aware, my daughter has had to go to the doctors today through obviously an issue that's been brought about from stress over the weekend. And it was stress that was brought on by an article that was actually published in the EDP and Dereham Times. Now, I don't know where that source came from, but it was, I found it, and she's definitely found it, intimidating and deflammatory in some of the statements that were put within the article, saying that an angry neighbour was trying to stop the application. And the third paragraph within the document suggests that the paper had spoken directly to the resident, which is totally incorrect. So I don't know where that article's come from, but it certainly hasn't done her any good, health-wise.
May I just confirm on the record that we were not approached for that article either, nor was anyone at the pub, and that when we found it, there's no one from the press here today. Often the press are here, but the local community reporters take their articles directly off the papers that put on the council website, so and then write it up as they see fit. But I can guarantee you we had nothing to do with what was said there, and we're just as frustrated as the way it's been reported as you are.
In the use of a temporary event notice, please?
Yes, and legally, actually, on a temporary event notice, a counter notice can be served and all conditions applied to that notice. So that was a new addition to the legal part of the Act. So yes, the reason for using a temporary event notice is that there's extra scrutiny, but also we would, of course, apply any conditions that were relevant to it.
No, I'd like to think that my dad has covered obviously everything that, as family, we have spoken about. He obviously knows how upsetting it has been, obviously, for his grandchildren, and obviously for myself as their mother, having to deal with it all. So I'd like to think that he has been open and honest about thoughts and feelings, and asked obviously the right questions to get a better understanding for yourselves and for us.
Excuse me shouting, it's because the
No, you're fine.
machinery is conked out. It was suggested by the solicitor that you could go straight to Mr. Barton with any concerns in the future.
Yes.
And I did suggest that perhaps Mr. Barton could give his contact details to Sue Hammond,
Okay.
and then she could send them to you if you would like that.
Potentially, yes.
Well, it would give you the direct access to the landlord,
Yes.
which means that you would not necessarily have to make complaints to the DPS.
Okay.
You could get in touch with Mr. Barton. He said he's perfectly happy
Okay.
for that to happen,
Okay.
if you'd like it.
Yeah, if he's happy for that to be our approach, yeah, that's fine by me. At least I'm going obviously to the man in charge.
Thank you. So I'll go back to
Yes, and I think I mentioned as part of my presentation, one of the things we would look to do is give early warning of events so you know what's coming up, and there needs to be a little flexibility for weather. Very unfortunate. This June has proven May and June has proven quite how temperamental it is at the moment. But yes, in certainly the anticipation is, because there are fewer events and we know where they're likely to fall, we can give advance notice. And certainly then, if it gets changed, we will try and update that notice.
Ms Wiseman, your father did ask some very relevant questions.
Of course. So I have no objection, obviously, to the beer garden being used for the sale of alcohol. That element is absolutely fine. My concern is the loudness of the music for my young children. I've got 4 children, age ranging between 14 and 6 months old. So when my initial complaint went through in 2023, my daughter at the time, or my youngest, was 2.5, and I was pregnant. And she was getting disturbed every weekend, every other weekend, by obviously the music element. Not so much with the people, until obviously they started to drink and try to sing along to the songs. And she used to often turn around and go like, "Mummy, why are they so loud?" I could only answer her around and sort of say, well, they're enjoying themselves, but I understand that it is hard for you because you would like to sleep. We would obviously close the window to try and make things quieter, but obviously with the heat that then made it uncomfortable for them to sleep. So that's basically, that's our concern. We would just like to be able to live in our home comfortably and sleep in our home comfortably without having to listen to boom, boom, boom. But it's not just the boom, 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 it's word for word. Even indoors doesn't affect the children's bedrooms, but when you've even got the music, the DJs indoors and live bands, in our front room and our master bedroom, you can still hear songs word for word, crowds sing along. But obviously, we are the adults, we kind of not accept it, but we can control it a little bit more because it's the front end of the house, not the back end of the house. So yeah, I suppose that's our side of things. The fact of, as I said, we're not here to turn around and say that we don't like them having drinks outside because they already have drinks outside of an evening. People will still use the beer garden as the beer garden. Our element of it is obviously the noise control, how it's going to be controlled, how it's going to be approached and managed and like policed to the 11 o'clock it finishes and people are sent back indoors, just to try and make sleeping comfortable for my children.
Yeah, we would have to plan these at least a month ahead, longer ahead to do these sort of things. So yeah, we would have plenty of notice and we can notify whoever. Quite happy to.
I think it would be helpful to notify the licensed
licensing team, to Paul, and also to perhaps copy in. I think that is a good thing to plan, to look forward to.
No.
Yeah, and that's a good example of one where if we'd have known on the night, we could have gone and checked and turned it down. After the event, we had to speak to Sue and then do an investigation. So we would invite you, if you're comfortable, to let Nigel know so that something can be done there and then. So, you know, to deal with those issues. But obviously, yeah, again, it was taken under advisement, and we spoke to people at the pub about it and about what levels are appropriate and what background is.
I'll also add the controls for the background music in the patio area were on the outside wall up until last year. I've now had them moved, so it's now controlled from the inside. So in the past, customers could go and turn them up, and we, obviously, if you're inside, you're not knowing what's going on. That's now been stopped. So we can control that. And also, we've got a plan to use smaller speakers and have them around the boundary rather than one or two speakers booming out. So steps are being made to try and improve things.
The solicitor, the landlord?
Yes, I do actually. As far as the licensing goes, I'm slightly concerned on the application where it says that they want to remove Annex 2. There seems to be an awful lot of information held within Annex 2 which isn't being transferred across to the new licence if issued. Is that just me being naive?
There does appear to be a large number of conditions in Annex 2.
Yeah.
The solicitor did previously explain.
Yeah.
Those conditions were transferred over under grandfather rights in 2005 from the old public entertainment licence.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff on there that's covered by other legislation, so like health and safety,
Yeah.
fire regulation.
Yeah.
In the modern world, we would not put those conditions on, and quite rightly, there's a lot of tidying up exercises that take place when people put in for a variation to remove those old conditions. The licence is in excess of 300 conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Wiseman. Mr. Barton, and Mr. Warne, this has been a very challenging situation, and as you know, the applicant said that
if I can sort of answer the question in sort of in the negative to get to the point I'm making, sometimes you will find that there are landlords and staff that go out of their way to kind of say, gosh, there's members of the public making our lives difficult. We can absolutely categorically state that's not the situation here. That's not the way we're going about doing our business here. That article was sent to me the day it was sent to Nigel, so we were caught off guard as much of it, by it as anyone else. I mean, I know who wrote it because it was written by the local community officers, and that's the way the local press now do things all the time. And effectively, they minesweep through all your committee reports and cherry pick the bits out of the reports they want and sensationalise it. And that's the way they do things. But I hopefully you will be given some reassurance by the fact that was not generated in any way by anyone associated with the pub. There is no opprobrium here. We're very pleased that there is a chance to have a dialogue, which means hopefully that going forward there is a better dialogue between the parties to try and make sure that we deal with any issues at their heart very quickly. And that's what we want, and that's what you want. But certainly there's no intention of trying to stoke any kind of ill feeling. I mean, it's totally counterproductive, you know.
Yeah, and I'm quite sure that Mr. Warren will make sure that nothing occurs.
I'm sure Mr. Barton will be very keen to ensure.
Yeah, I've had dealings with the press.
I'm not coming up at the weekends, I'm afraid.
I've had dealings with the press. Yeah, I've had dealings with the press over COVID, and they ask for a story and they print something completely different. So I've not dealt with the EDP for over 2 years because I know what they're like, and I was annoyed with that story as yourselves because it was totally wrong and out of context what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head, no.
Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this brief. And thank you very much for coming along and spending time to express your concerns. I'm sorry that there was a report in the press which has caused stress because it's, you know, that's just totally unfair and it shouldn't happen, candidly. From our point of view, you've heard what this application is and what it isn't. We are dealing with the Prevention of Public Nuisance Licensing objective, and we are dealing with a variation here, not a review of the premises licence. That's not to denigrate or negate anything that's gone on in the past, but I hope you've been given some comfort by the fact that when we got complaints from Sue, we stopped doing the activities, we've done the right thing, we've made an application, we've put forward an operating plan with very limited live and recorded music outside, with times that are limited, with tests and checks and balances that are in place, irrespective of whether I could have come along here and put my foot down and said, well, it's not about that, that's the Live Music Act, this is only about sale of alcohol outside. We've dealt with this to be as open and honest and candid as we can about the intentions of the pub. You've heard from Mr. Barton about providing numbers, about ensuring things are turned off at the right time. You've heard about him changing things to make sure that they work better, different speakers, removing volumes, etc. So there is a proactive approach to dealing with this that I hope gives you some comfort. Sue will, of course, be able to monitor in conjunction with Mr. and Miss Wiseman, and hopefully between us we can get to a level where there is that balance struck, and this is all about balance and finding that. So I'm going to submit finally that this application could be granted for the sale of alcohol outside and the changes to the licensing, the premises licence in terms of conditions, and that both taken together, along with the noise management plan and the reassurances you've heard today about how we'll use TENS, the number of events, etc., mean that you can grant this licence as applied for. Thank you.
So, can I just clarify, Councillor Richmond will be remaining behind. He's the substitute and in training, so he will not take part in any of the discussion. He's just here to observe and learn.